Dr. Peter DeHaan is not a cable news pundit, a political operative, or an ideological blogger. He is a career researcher, consultant, and publisher with a PhD specializing in call center and business management metrics. His background is in measurement, systems analysis, and organizational behavior. He approaches the subject of accountability not from a place of moral grandstanding, but from the cold, hard data of what makes systems, be they corporate, communal, or familial, function or fail. This is a technician diagnosing a machine, not a preacher delivering a sermon. His book is a systematic breakdown of a pervasive social malfunction. The central observable phenomenon he identifies is this: across multiple spheres of American life, the robust, generative principle of accountability is being surgically extracted and replaced with a dysfunctional parasitic twin, a culture of blame anchored in a psychology of victimhood. DeHaan is mapping a pathology, and his tone is one of urgent clinical concern. Part 2. The core definitions: accountability versus its counterfeits. DeHaan's entire thesis rests on precise operational definitions. He does not use these terms colloquially. He defines them as distinct behavioral modes. Accountability is proactive, forward-looking, and solution-oriented. It is the personal and collective willingness to 1. Own one's actions, decisions, and their outcomes. 2. Answer for the results, especially when they are unfavorable. 3. Commit to a course of correction, learning, and improved future performance. True accountability, DeHaan argues, is an engine of trust, growth, and high performance. It is the bedrock of functional relationships and effective organizations. It is inherently empowering because it rests on a foundation of agency. I did this, therefore I can fix it or do better. Responsibility is its close cousin, the state of being the causal agent, the one whose duty it is to see a task or principle through. Accountability is what you enact after responsibility has been exercised or neglected. Blame is accountability's corrupt imitation. It is reactive, backward-looking, and person-focused. It is not about fixing a problem. It is about assigning fault for a problem. It is not about learning. It is about punishing. It seeks a target, not a root cause. Blame creates a culture of fear, cover-ups, and scapegoating. It is inherently disempowering because its goal is to transfer stain, not to solve. Victimhood is the psychological fuel for the blame culture. It is a learned cognitive framework in which an individual or group primarily perceives themselves as acted upon by external forces, other people, the system, circumstances, interprets setbacks and criticisms as confirmations of their powerlessness, and sees the primary path to moral standing or resolution as gaining recognition for their suffering from an authority or the public. Victimhood, in DeHaan's analysis, is the abandonment of agency. It is the belief that things happen to me, therefore I am not the author of my outcomes and am morally excused from dealing with their full consequences. The culture of excuses is the behavioral output of this blend of blame and victimhood. The language of this culture is filled with but, however, you don't understand, I couldn't because, and it's not my fault. Part 3. The multi-layered root causes of the collapse. DeHaan spends significant time arguing that this shift is not accidental nor monolithic. It is the result of several interconnected, self-reinforcing systems. 1. The distortion of the therapeutic mindset. Here, DeHaan makes a crucial distinction. He does not attack legitimate therapy or mental health care. His target is the cultural seepage and misapplication of therapeutic concepts into the general ethos. The language of trauma, triggers, and self-care has been weaponized into a shield against any form of discomfort, including the necessary discomfort of constructive criticism or facing consequences. When every negative emotion is pathologized as harm, and harm is seen as the ultimate moral wrong, then the person who caused the discomfort, the boss giving feedback, the teacher assigning a low grade becomes a villain, and the harmed party is absolved of any role in the dynamic. This creates what he terms fragility by design. The legalistic adversarial model infiltrating everything. We live in a society where the first question after an accident is often, who can we sue? This formal adversarial model, where every conflict is a zero-sum game with a guilty party and a damaged party, has become the default model for everyday disputes. It teaches people to think like lawyers building a case for their own blamelessness, not like collaborators solving a shared problem. This system incentivizes hiding mistakes and documenting the failures of others for potential use, destroying trust. Systemic failures in leadership and education. DeHaan observes that from permissive parenting styles to corporate feel-good management, institutions have often abdicated their role in enforcing clear standards and consistent consequences. In the name of empathy or boosting self-esteem, they reward excuse-making. When a child's failing grade is blamed on the teacher or an employee's chronic lateness is excused by stress, the system itself is teaching that accountability is optional. Most damningly, when leaders, CEOs, politicians, community figures publicly and blatantly refuse to own their failures, they send a permission signal to the entire group. You don't have to either. The media and narrative ecosystem. A 24/7 media environment thrives on simple, emotionally charged stories. Complex events are relentlessly compressed into narratives of unambiguous villains and victims. The public is trained to consume and then replicate this reductive lens, applying it to workplace disputes, family arguments, and political discourse. This makes nuanced understanding and personal accountability impossible, as every player is forced into a stereotyped role. Part 4. The catastrophic costs, a world without accountability. DeHaan details the fallout with the precision of an engineer describing system failure modes. In organizations, innovation dies because taking intelligent risks becomes too dangerous. Failure leads to blame, not learning. Politics and back-covering consume energy that should go to productive work. Morale plummets as high performers become resentful of carrying those who are not held accountable. Ultimately, the organization becomes brittle and uncompetitive. In communities and society, social capital, the willingness to trust, cooperate, and uphold informal agreements evaporates. Every interaction becomes transactional and potentially litigious. Civic engagement withers because if problems are always someone else's fault, why volunteer to fix them? For the individual, the personal cost is perhaps the greatest. Adopting a victimhood mindset is a recipe for learned helplessness and chronic resentment. It stunts maturity, arrests personal development, and leads to a passive, grievance-filled life. One surrenders their own agency and then becomes bitter at the world for having power over them, a tragic self-made trap. DeHaan's ultimate conclusion here: a system without accountability is a system without trust. Trust is the prediction that others will own their commitments. If accountability vanishes, promises become meaningless, and the foundation of all cooperation crumbles. Part 5. The Manifesto, a prescription for restoration. This is not a lament, but a call to arms. DeHaan's manifesto is a step-by-step, actionable program for rebuilding accountability, starting with the self. 1. Practice radical personal ownership. This is the non-negotiable first step. You must declare to yourself that the buck stops with you. This involves eradicating excuse language. Purge but, however, I would have but from your vocabulary. Institute a personal after-action review. After any significant outcome, ask, what did I do that contributed to this result? What could I have done differently? This is not about self-flagellation, but about honest self-appraisal focused on agency. Public acknowledgement. When you err, say so clearly without caveats and state your corrective plan. I was wrong. I missed the deadline. Here is how I will get it to you now, and here is the process I've implemented to ensure it doesn't again. 2. Clarify expectations with unyielding precision. Ambiguity is the breeding ground of blame. In every project, relationship, or agreement, invest disproportionate time up front defining what is the specific deliverable. What are the objective standards for success? What is the exact timeline? Who is unambiguously responsible for each component? Write it down. 3. Restore consequences with calm, consistent integrity. Consequences are not about anger or punishment. They are the natural and logical outcomes of choices. Good performance must be met with recognition and reward. Poor performance or broken commitments must incur a cost, a lost opportunity, a need to redo work, a formal correction. This must be applied proportionally, predictably, and without malice. The goal is not to hurt, but to teach the system that choices matter. Removing consequences destroys the feedback loop necessary for learning. 4. Lead by example from the top relentlessly. Accountability cannot be delegated downward. It must be modeled upward. A leader's most powerful tool is their public vulnerability in owning their mistakes. This act gives everyone else the safety to do the same. If leaders play the blame game, they guarantee the whole organization will.
5. Reframe the concept of failure. A high accountability culture must distinguish between blameworthy failure, negligence, recklessness, or malice, and praiseworthy failure, a well-considered risk taken in good faith that did not pan out. The latter must be analyzed, learned from, and even celebrated for the courage and information it provided. This removes fear and fosters intelligent experimentation. Conclusion: the ultimate choice, agency or impotence. Peter DeHaan's The Accountability Manifesto concludes with a stark binary choice. The path of blame and victimhood is a descent into collective impotence, chronic conflict, and stunted lives. It is seductive because it offers immediate moral justification and relieves short-term pressure, but it mortgages your long-term power and peace. The path of accountability is the harder path of maturity. It requires courage, self-honesty, and the resilience to face your own errors. But it is the only path that leads to genuine trust, real achievement, deep self-respect, and true freedom. For only the person who owns their actions can ever truly be the author of their life. The restoration does not begin with a political movement or a new law. It begins in the mirror, and in the very next moment you are tempted to say, "It's not my fault." The manifesto is a challenge. Will you choose the language of the owner or the lexicon of the victim? The future of your endeavors and the health of your community hinges on that daily, personal choice.